Oh, it would have been lint. That would have been bad.
Welcome everybody. It looks like we've got a few people joining the class, the session this morning. Clint, can you hear me? All right. Welcome Cody, Clint, Tammy, Drusilla. We may have others joining soon, but if not, we'll have a good time, just the five of us.
The session I was helping with ended like at 10:59. So
okay, yeah. So people are still
trying to figure out how to get back to the schedule and how to get into the next meeting.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay, well, let's go ahead and at least start preparing. We may have others join in the near future, but let's go ahead and at least get set up to experience Nearpod. That's one of my goals in this session, is that you experience some of the things it's capable of from the point of view of a student. And then also we'll look at it from the teacher's point of view as well. So if you, I'm assuming you joined this this Zoom session by going to the conference Canvas page, and on that conference Canvas page for this particular session, you know, there's a Nearpod activity code and also a Nearpod button that you can click to get into this Nearpod lesson. I've also, this may be easier, I've also copy pasted that into the chat, the Zoom chat. So if you look, typically it's at the bottom of the screen there. There's a chat button that you can open up the chat, and I've pasted in saying, you know, please join my Nearpod lesson by going to this link and use the activity code 9HAGX. And by doing that, you'll be able to, like I say, experience this lesson as if you were a student in a class with a teacher using Nearpod. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead at this time and share my screen. I'll introduce myself, and then we'll jump into to actually using and experiencing Nearpod. Okay, so hopefully you can see my Nearpod home screen. Whenever I log into Nearpod, this is what I see. And I can I can search for other people's lessons from a library that I have access to, or I can also go down and use my own Nearpod lessons that I've created or that I've curated. So I'm going to choose the one for this session and get that started. Okay, so this may be a little, it's possible that this may be a little confusing at first. You know, you're seeing my screen, but you also should have another window in which you're connected to the Nearpod activity. And I can see, but just by looking at the screen in the lower left corner, I can see that 3 of you so far are signed into my Nearpod activity or lesson. All right. So let's start just by introducing myself. My name is Rob Bentley. I'm from the Utah Education Network. I've been there for 13 years. Before teaching and coming to UEN, I was a Spanish teacher in Granite School District. I also taught language arts, and I did that for many years, got a master's in instructional design and educational technology, and then taught another year of Spanish, and then came to UEN. At UEN, I get to work with awesome teachers all over the state, doing presentations like this, but we also offer courses for credit or for licensure points. Many of you are probably aware of our website, uen.org. That's where you can learn more about all the things that we do. But in the last couple of years, one of the most popular topics that I've been asked to present on and that our team has been asked to present on is Nearpod. And there's a couple of reasons why. In this session, I hope to introduce you to Nearpod and go a little further than just an introduction. I want to push you, encourage you to, if you have access to it, to start creating with it. It's a very powerful tool. When people ask me, you know, what is the purpose of Nearpod? What can it really help me do? I think of a couple of things. First of all, I'm a big formative assessment guy. I think I'm a true believer in the importance of formative assessment. And Nearpod is excellent for formative assessment. You can as you're teaching, you can kind of test the students' knowledge and information and their understanding. And it can help guide the rest of your lesson or future lessons that you do. And so formative assessment is a major reason why I think it's powerful. There's also something to be said for interactivity. There's a lot, it takes a lesson that might just be a lecture and instead makes it an interactive experience for your students, and it's interactive for you as well as the teacher. So those are two reasons why I would consider using Nearpod: formative assessment and interactivity. There's other reasons too, like there's a game built into it. So if you want to add a little bit of fun and kind of gamification to your classroom, Nearpod can help with that. It's a visual tool as well. There's lots of good reasons to consider using this. So let's jump in. For those that just recently joined, there's a couple of different ways you can join this lesson and participate with me. I've put the easiest way in the chat. So if you can just go to the Zoom chat, there's a link with a code that you can put in to join this lesson. So I mentioned formative assessment. I just want to quickly put in a word, you know, on behalf of formative assessment. You know, formative assessment is kind of like a chef that is creating or cooking up some soup for a very important meal, right? That chef can taste the soup, make adjustments, add flavoring, or make it hotter or less hot. All of these things to make the soup just right. That's like formative assessment, okay? But unfortunately, in many schools, and I know when I was teaching Spanish, especially for my first 2 years, all of my, well, not all, but much of my focus was on summative assessment, right? The end of unit test or the end of year test, the CRT tests is what we used, you know, what we would do, the end of year tests. That's where a lot of the focus was. And yet at that point, it's too late. It's too late for the students to make much in the way of adjustments or course corrections. And so formative assessment, I would hope would happen at many points along the way, in every classroom, or at least, every couple of days, there's formative assessment going on. And then there's a summative assessment at the end of the unit. Okay. At this point, while I continue to kind of talk about formative assessment for a bit, I want to also show off some of the features of Nearpod. So what we have next is a video by an educator named Rick Warmelli, and he's an expert in differentiation in the classroom, but also formative assessment. And this video, because I included it in my Nearpod activity, I can decide how to have you experience this video. Okay, I could say that this video is only going to be played on my device, this device only, right? So that would be great if we were together physically. If we were in person, face to face in a classroom, I could have this video play just on my computer, or on a screen that my students could see, and not on their devices. Okay, but since we're all distanced, I could choose this, all devices. Okay, so now at this point, you have control over the video. You can press play and experience the video on your own computers. Now, in the interest of time, I'm not going to make you watch this video, but I would encourage you to maybe jot down this name, Rick Warmelli and formative assessment. He's got a lot to say on the importance of formative assessment. One of the things he talks about is, with formative assessment, it's not just assessing what the students know and understand. Okay, that's not all there is to it. There's really a formative assessment cycle. We need to help the students to see where they are going. So like the standards, and also their own goals and things. What are they trying to achieve? Where am I now, and how do I close the gap? So hopefully our students are thinking about these things, but also we as teachers, where am I trying to get my students to? Where are they now, and how do I help them close the gap? Okay. So, traditionally, there's, for decades, really, formative assessment has been done in a low-tech way, right? People use hand signals, interactive whiteboard, or not interactive whiteboards, but personal whiteboards, right? Students can have their own personal whiteboard that they write answers on, hold them up, and the teacher can see, how well everybody understands. So these are all great options for formative assessment. But there's also high-tech formative assessment. For a while, clickers were really the rage, the in thing. Everyone wanted a clicker system for their classroom. Well, today, if I were back teaching Spanish, I would not, bother with buying a clicker system. Why? Because we have this wealth of free online, or mostly free online tools to help us do formative assessment. And really, probably the shining star of all of these is Nearpod. I love Kahoot and some of these others, but Nearpod is really a wonderful full-featured tool. And at UEN, we've recently partnered with the Utah State Board of Education and with Nearpod in helping to provide it for most schools in Utah. So many, many more people have access to it now because of that. I want to show off another feature of Nearpod. It's not just slides and it's not just videos. You can also do some interactivity, some collaboration. So what we have next is a Collaborate board. And it's kind of like Padlet, if you're familiar with Padlet. So with this collaborative board, I have a question there for you. What formative assessment tools are you most familiar with? Okay, so I know the session today is on Nearpod, but have some of you used Nearpod before? If you have, please click and type in that you've used Nearpod. Maybe you've also used Socrative. That's one of the older ones of these that I used and I still use now and then. It's really good. Okay, so I've posted some of those that I use the most. Those are probably the top 3 for me. And I can see Tammy's answer, Sarah's, Jolene. So this is the idea of a collaborate board. It's a place for everyone in the classroom, everyone involved can share their ideas, and you can see each other's ideas. Okay. Now, as the teacher, I have some extra controls over this, right? Like I can delete any of these. If teachers are always concerned when I show this. Well, what if a student posts something inappropriate? I don't know if you noticed, but I had a pop-up on the screen that asked if I wanted to approve each answer, right? So that if you are concerned about students posting inappropriate answers, you could select to be the moderator basically and approve or disapprove each of the posts. With you, of course, I didn't need to do that. You can also go in and you can heart answers. Okay, now I think you can do that as well as participants. You can say, oh, I really like that answer. I like that answer. But as the teacher, I can also delete answers. All right. Now, there's also an option to upload images, right? So I can just click here and upload an image. So think about that. If I was out using a tablet, like an iPad or a smartphone, I could take pictures and then upload those to this collaborate board. Okay, so another way that you could use this as a way to share visual images as a class. Okay. All right, it looks like many of you are familiar with at least one formative assessment tool on this list. I see, it looks like 2 people familiar with Nearpod. Oh, look, there's Clint uploading a picture. But yeah, before we go on, just this example of Clint's picture, I can think of all sorts of really wonderful ways you could use this tool, because Nearpod works very well on mobile devices, right? So you could do like a scavenger hunt. An easy example would be like a geometry scavenger hunt. So the students using iPads or Chromebooks or whatever it might be, look around the classroom to find examples of a cylinder or a rectangle or a triangle or whatever it might be. They take a picture of it, they post it here. Now, if you can also do this from home as well, if you're teaching, during the pandemic, if you're teaching or working with students long distance, they could go around their house and find examples of these kinds of shapes. So anyway, I want you to kind of think outside the box when it comes to this collaborate board. I'm going to click next to move on to the next part. So all of those tools, Kahoot, Socrative, and especially Nearpod, help me as a teacher identify students who could be struggling. It also helps me improve as a teacher because I can see, okay, if I'm explaining this concept and only 20% of the students are getting it, maybe I need to phrase it differently. Maybe we need to practice, some hands-on activities or do something to improve that the student comprehension and retention. But it also involves all students in the answering of questions. This is one of the best things about Nearpod, in my opinion. Think about the traditional classroom with a teacher maybe asking a question. You get the same 5 or 6 students who almost immediately want to answer that question. And then there's always a few students that just are so reluctant. I was that student, by the way, in my youth. I was the student that knew the answer or had a question, but just never or very rarely would volunteer an answer. With Nearpod, everyone is expected to participate. Everyone is expected to answer. And there's some benefit that comes from sharing your answers or your questions. So I think it's a really powerful way to get more students involved. And then what it says here at the bottom, you can add more fun and interactivity to the classroom. And Nearpod is the perfect example of that. There's another powerful reason though to use Nearpod and also other formative assessment tools if you'd like. And that is something called retrieval practice. And I'm just going to breeze through this real quick. There was a study done with college students in art history class. 4 groups of students witnessed the same lecture, and it was just a traditional kind of boring college lecture. At the end of the lecture, there were 4 groups, and they were a month after the lecture they were tested. Group number 1 only watched the lecture. Group number 2 watched the lecture and then was given a review sheet with everything that was covered in the lecture so they could study. Group 3 watched the lecture, and immediately after the lecture, they were given a multiple choice quiz on the content of the lecture. Group number 4 watched the lecture, and then immediately after the lecture, they were given a short answer quiz on the content of the lecture. Okay, so I want to ask you a question. This is a poll or a survey that you can conduct through Nearpod. So once again, kind of while we're learning about formative assessment and Nearpod, I'm also kind of modeling some of the tools that and ways you can use it. So of the 4 groups, which one remembered the information the best, do you think? Okay. And you know, typically this is pretty, pretty easy. People usually identify one of the top 2, but people don't always get the very highest. So we'll see how you do. So everyone that's signed in to this activity, to my Nearpod activity, that to get here, you went to the chat, you clicked the link, used the code. So the people that have done that, they're seeing the question on their device, and they're answering. Now, if I were doing this with a group of students, I would not have this screen up while doing the activity. Why? Because you can glance at this and see, most people are answering, A or C or whatever. And so you wouldn't want to show this to the students. Instead, imagine walking around the classroom with an iPad or a smartphone or a Chromebook, and you're controlling what the students can see, but they can't see your screen, right? So you could run your whole lesson. I can see people changing their answers. You could run your whole lesson from a smartphone if you want, or from an iPad or a Chromebook, instead of having a projector and a screen. You can just do it all through this. Okay, so I'm going to advance to the next slide. So this, I think most of you picked D, and this is the results of the study. So the people that were given a short answer quiz immediately after learning the information or watching the lecture, a month later, they remembered it better than any of the other groups. What I find interesting, is that the people that took the multiple choice quiz, they did the second best, right? Those were both better than being given a review sheet. And so there's something about being asked questions and having to try to recall. It's called retrieval practice. There's something about that does help students to remember. Nearpod is great for that. Okay, at this point, I wanted to just show off a few of the other features and tools that you can use from within Nearpod. This one is a fill in the blanks activity. Sometimes it's called a cloze activity, C-L-O-Z-E. But if you're one of the 6 signed into this lesson, on your screen, I think you have the Gettysburg Address, if I recall, and you can just go in and try to fill in the blanks. Okay. So please try that. And I just showed the answers there briefly. When you're done, you submit that. And of course, similar to Kahoot, similar to Socrative, with Nearpod, your answers are recorded. And so the students or the teacher can go back later and review how each student did on any of these activities. So, or at least most of the activities. There's a couple of exceptions that we'll look at. All right, so I can see your scores as they come in, and I can also tell, you know, how many people have finished or not finished. When I'm ready, I can click View Answers. And so this, if it's just for me on my own handheld device, you know, I will know what the questions and answers are. Or if I have this projected on a computer screen, the whole class can see it, okay? All right, I'm gonna advance to another example of the kinds of formative assessment tools that you have from within Nearpod. Okay, this is a drawing activity. And I used to teach Spanish, so I wanted to throw in a Spanish question here. So these are a couple of animals. If you're not sure, just make a guess. But I'd like you to draw un gato y un perro. Okay, so two different animals. So those 6 of you that are signed in to the lesson, just give it a try. If you have no idea, that's okay. Now, as you start drawing, you probably noticed, you know, Cody his screen changed. It says Cody in progress, okay, because he's started drawing something. Same with Tammy. So as the teacher, I don't have to wait until you're done to see the work that you're doing. There is a delay, but pretty quickly after you start drawing, I start seeing what you're drawing. Okay, so you know, that's a really nice feature, especially consider things like math. In a math class, if a student is setting up an equation wrong or doing something wrong with like reducing fractions or whatever it might be, the teacher could identify a problem early and maybe go by the student's desk and say, you're doing great, but maybe take a look at this. You know, you might need to change this or that. So it's a nice feature that you get a preview of the work they're doing. Wow, these are some really good drawings. Very well done. I'm gonna move ahead to the next aspect of Nearpod that I want to show off. And this I believe, if I recall, is a cell, right? This is a portion of a cell, and it should be interactive. So you should be able to click on that on your device or tap on it if you're using a smartphone, and drag and move it around to get a different angle, a different look at this. Okay. Now this is just one of several kind of 3D interactives that you can experience through Nearpod, and you can assign it to your students. I'll show you how to do all this as part of the second half of the lesson today. Okay, next we have a game. It's called Time to Climb, and this is one of the newer features in Nearpod. And in advance, I created some questions. I've just decided to randomize the answers, so you can't cheat off of each other's devices. Of course, if you're together, that's when that's an issue, but that's okay. There's 4 different features or themes that you can choose from. I'm going to choose the Halloween theme. You can have sound enabled or not, and I'll just click continue. Now, the way this works is we've got a mountain, in this case with a haunted house at the top, and you should be seeing some directions on how to connect to this time to climb activity. Okay, the 6 of you that are signed in to my Nearpod. When you do get connected, you appear as a character, a pretty frightening character in some cases. And the goal is to climb to the top of the mountain. That's why it's called time to climb. The way you progress up the mountain is by answering questions that I've set up in advance. Now, for any of you that joined the session late, look in the chat. There's a link to this Nearpod activity, so you should be able to join if you want. Okay, I'm going to click start to start the time to climb activity. You get a countdown. And maybe I should have disabled the music, but let's go ahead and play this just for a couple of questions. So the first question, several of you got it right and got it right quickly. The faster you get it right, the more benefit that you get in advancing up the mountain. Okay, so Tammy's in the lead right now, and you're all working on question number 2, it looks like. And now we're advancing up the mountain even more. Okay, so we'll just do this last question, and then we'll move on to the next Nearpod feature. All right, Tammy's just running away with it. Okay, so I'm going to advance to the next, but I mentioned gamification. That's the game feature in Nearpod right now. I'm confident that they're going to put more activities like that in the future, but for now, that's a nice feature. It reminds me a little bit of Kahoot and also quizzes and other kind of game focused formative assessment tools. But the nice thing about Nearpod is all these things I've been showing you, they're all built into one product, into Nearpod. So you don't have to, bring in Kahoot and Padlet, and later, we'll talk about Flipgrid and there's a bunch of other tools. You could piece all of those together and replace Nearpod, or you could just use Nearpod that has those same tools, or very similar, all in one product. Okay, so this next example that I wanted to kind of show off for you is VR, virtual reality field trips, basically. So I'm clicking and dragging on this image, and I'm looking down, looking up, looking around. I'm trying to figure out where I am. If I recall, I think this is Easter Island, which is part of Chile, where I learned Spanish. I never got to go to Easter Island, but in Chile, that's where I learned Spanish, and it's part of the country of Chile. So anyway, you can also experience this on your own devices. You can click and drag. If you have a virtual reality headset, even just a cheap one, it doesn't have to have any special, capability. Just, I have a $10 VR headset that I can put my cell phone in, and I can enter VR, and I can look into my cell phone basically and experience this as if I were there. It really is a neat experience if you don't get seasick from it. Okay, but pretty cool. And if you don't have those VR headsets or handheld VR devices, that's okay. You can just click and drag on the picture, and it's kind of like a virtual reality field trip to Easter Island. Okay. Next up, I just want to put in a quick word about Flipgrid. And I should be checking chat more often. I promise to try to do better the last 20 minutes. But I'm not going to demonstrate this, but if you're familiar with Flipgrid, it's a wonderful tool, a way to get students recording themselves and video and audio, and they answer questions that you ask, and then they can watch each other's videos. Well, and it's done in such a way that it's private, right? It's shared only within your school, etc., and within your classroom. So the nice thing about Nearpod and Flipgrid is they integrate very well together. And so you can create a Flipgrid activity from within Nearpod. The students don't have to leave Nearpod to do the Flipgrid activity. So let me take a quick look at the chat, and then we're going to look at how to start creating this. Okay, so it looks like in the chat there were just a couple people that didn't have the link, and I think that the reason that happens is, like, I probably shared the link too early. If you come in after I share the link, I don't think it shows up for you. But Clint looks like reposted it, so we're good. Thank you. So at this point, I'm gonna exit the activity, and I want to show you how you can get started using Nearpod to create your own lessons, and also to find other people's lessons that they've created. Now, I'm hoping that your school or your district has set up Nearpod, you know, for you to use. Okay, but even if they haven't, even if your school, you know, hasn't opted into this, you can still start using Nearpod. Okay, they have a free account that can do almost everything that I just showed. There's a couple things it can't do, and I used that free account for probably 5-6 years and used it very effectively. It is limited. I could only have, I think it was 10 lessons, and that was it. But I still used it very effectively for 5 or 6 years. If you're interested, if your school or district is not part of the Nearpod deal that UEN and USBE set up with them, you can check it out. You can look into it by going to uen.org/Nearpod. Okay, and I'll put that in the chat as well. We have Nearpod news that tells you about latest features and things like that, and all sorts of great professional development opportunities about Nearpod. And then underneath, toward the bottom, it says, get your LEA involved. In other words, get your school or your district involved in the Nearpod agreement. Okay, and there's information here about what your district or school would need to do to make it so that you have access to this, and, you know, all of your fellow educators at your school. So having said that, like I mentioned earlier, it is also possible just to sign up for a free account, and you get great features that way too.
And if you do, let me just jump in, Rob, sorry. If you
okay.
do sign up for a free account, use your school address, because most of our districts are either in or in the process of getting onboarded. And if you're using your school email address, you don't have to do anything. As soon as your district's in, then your account has been blessed and you'll have access to everything. So
yeah, that's a very important point. Yeah, use your professional, your school email address. Definitely. So here I am in my account, and I want to start just by showing you how to find the wealth of information and resources that already exist. You know, we all know what it's like to be a busy teacher, especially right now with the pandemic, and lesson planning has just exploded. As you know, we've had to revise materials and things in many cases. The good news is Nearpod has pre-made lessons for almost any topic. Okay, so here at the top of my Nearpod home screen, it says My Library, and I can search for lessons that I've created or that I have copied, right? So you can see I have one called the water cycle. I'll just do a search, and I found the one called water cycle. So that searches my own library. But here at the left, there's a panel, and you can go down and search the Nearpod library. Now at UEN, we have access to 7 additional libraries. Now, if your school or district either has or will, sign on to this Nearpod agreement, you'll get, I think it's 5 of the 7. So you end up with almost everything that we have here. But for now, I'm just going to click Nearpod library, and I'm going to do a search of everything in the Nearpod library. Okay. And I'm going to start with literacy. Okay. I'll just type the word literacy and see what we get. So we have something called, or a lesson called evaluating media. And this is actually, it's not just a lesson, it's a pack of lessons. How can I tell? Well, here at the top, it says 8 lessons. So this is like a packet of 8 total lessons, all dealing with different aspects of evaluating media. I'm going to click preview bundle, and you can see, some of the subtopics. Okay. We've got, let's see, that's related content. So in evaluating media, we've got a teacher's guide, we've got a pre-assessment. Okay, and then it gets into the actual lessons. We've got sourcing your information, evaluating evidence, fighting cognitive biases. Some pretty important information and content. For me to create that from scratch would take hours and hours and hours, but it's already done. Now I can copy that to my own library, and then if it's not quite right, or if I disagree with how they explained this or that, I can change it. I can edit it just for me, and customize it for my class. Okay, so the way I would do that is I would just click here, show in my library. Okay, so that whole packet now is part of my library. Okay, here's the one on fighting cognitive biases. You'll notice that there's an edit button. So I can click that edit button and adjust it. It only edits my copy of that lesson. Okay, I'm gonna go back to the Nearpod library. If you recall, I had searched for media or literacy. I think it was literacy that I searched for. We've got social media lessons. We've got literacy about like financial matters, financial literacy, the stock market, taxes, information literacy about Wikipedia, just all sorts of different types of literacy. If I search for media, I'll get some of the same content, right? There's some overlap. Sourcing your information, okay, Snapchat, Instagram, lessons about it. Here's one about fake news, no fake news. What is a news story? Now, I'm trying to focus on media and literacy and things like that, but just about anything in the K-12 curriculum, just about anything that a teacher would need to teach or want to teach, there's a lesson. It might not be exactly what you're looking for, but it's going to be pretty good. Okay, so there we have fractions. Let's try one a little bit. This is kind of a hard one. Edgar Allan Poe. I don't know. Do they have anything? They do. Okay, so I taught language arts 7th and 8th and 9th grade over the years. And there were some good, Annabelle Lee we taught, and others, the Cask of Amontillado, the Raven. And look at that, there's a lesson in Nearpod about each of those, okay? Unbelievable to me that it's that specialized and that detailed, So again, if I want to use this with my students, I could just add to my library, and then I could go in and edit it if I need to or want to. All right, now for the real test, at least for me. Do they have Spanish or French lessons? They do, okay? It seems like foreign language, world languages are always the ones that are kind of left out, at least in my experience. But not in this case, not in this case. There's a whole bunch of Spanish language, world language videos, not videos, lessons, Nearpod lessons. So I hope that you'll take the time to do some searches and see some of the wonderful content that is available inside of Nearpod. Now, when I just had the free account, I still did this. I still searched for other people's lessons and pre-made content, and a lot of it was still free to me, but some of it would come up and say, this is for pro users only, people that are paying for Nearpod. So that was a little frustrating. I still found good stuff to use. Well, now that UEN is part of the deal, that where we get Nearpod for everyone at UEN and also at most schools in Utah, it's opened up. You know, now there's just I never see anything that I can't use for free. It's all included for me. And like I said, here at the left at my Nearpod homepage, we've been searching in the Nearpod library, but I want to point out, like I said earlier, that there are 7, in my case, extra libraries as well that are special ones. And I think typically schools get 5 of these, okay? It might be 4, but like there's English learners, an English learner library. So for people, for students that are trying to learn English while also trying to learn math and science and social studies, ELL students or ESL students, there's a whole library of content to help them.
I think the ones we get, Rob, are digital citizenship and literacy, college and career exploration, and social emotional learning.
Okay.
Those are the 3 that come with. Yep.
Okay. So those additional libraries that Clint didn't mention, those would be additional purchases. Like you could still get those, but your school or district would have to pay to get those. They'd have to pay Nearpod. But thank you, I appreciate that. We can focus on those that you have access to. So let's just quickly, I want to just mention social and emotional learning. This has been, especially lately, the importance of it seems like it's growing, right? More and more people are aware of SEL, social and emotional learning. And you know, with a pandemic going on, it's just a very important topic to help students learn. So growth mindset, you know, we've got lifelong learning, just a whole bunch of things to help students to cope with, you know, situations and difficult, challenging things, and focus on a way that's helpful. College and career exploration is another one that is fantastic. Okay, let's just take a quick look at it at college exploration, and you'll notice that it's also divided up by grades. So like this is grades 3 through 5. This is K through 2. So you're not just picking a topic, you're picking the appropriate grade level for your students. So anyway, I think, you know, step 1 to learn to use Nearpod is just do some searches, find content that you want to take and use, and then add it to your library. I showed you that button that says add to my library, or sometimes it says show in my library. Once you've done that, you can just click this Nearpod button in the upper left, and it'll appear here inside your library. Okay, here's one that I found, mis colores favoritos. Okay, I did not create this, but if I wanted to use this with my students now, all I have to do is click either live participation or student paste. Now, let's talk about the difference. It's kind of what you would expect, but live participation is if you want to experience this like we did at the beginning of the lesson today, with everyone answering pretty much simultaneously, okay? If you want to do this as a homework activity, you can click student paste, and students would just have to come take the class or take the lesson on their own time. But let's say we wanted to do live participation. You just click that. It gives you instructions. The students would go to join.nearpod.com and they would put in this code. Once they do, they'll be added here in the lower left. You'll be able to click to see the students that have signed in. And when you're ready, you just click this arrow to advance to the next slide or the next activity. So now that we've looked at how to find other people's lessons and how to then actually conduct the lesson, either as a live lesson or as homework, student paced, let's also look at the beginnings of how to create your own Nearpod lessons. I'm going to click here on Nearpod just to make sure I'm on my homepage. I am, okay. I love that button. It just kind of resets everything. I know I'm where I need to be. So here I have a create button. It's here. It's also here in the upper right. But I'll just click create, and I can choose from a couple of things. I can choose to create a lesson, a video, or I can create lessons in Google Slides. If you're a Google Slides fanatic or you've used it a lot, you can create a Nearpod lesson in Google Slides. It's kind of a different way to approach it, but for some people that's perfect. The videos option is really exciting. This is a new feature. It's in beta still, as you can see, but it makes it so you can create interactive videos. If any of you are familiar with Edpuzzle, it's very much like Edpuzzle, but built in to Nearpod. Okay, for today, we have about 5 minutes left. So with our last 5 minutes, I'm gonna just focus on creating a lesson from inside Nearpod, okay? And at first, if you're used to PowerPoint or Google Slides, this is gonna seem a little clunky, a little strange just at first. It doesn't seem that way to me now, but it did when I started. So I'm just gonna click add slide, and I get to decide, do I want to add some content or some activities? Okay, I'm gonna start with content and just a simple slide, okay? And I'm just gonna call this slide La Comida, the food in Spanish. Now, if I want to, I can add other things like pictures, I can upload files, I can add even audio. Down here at the bottom, there's an audio button, but I'm just gonna save and exit. Okay, so that slide is done. Okay, I'm shortening a little bit because we're running out of time. So now that I've got a title slide, I can add in a video, okay? I can add in web content, okay, like a web page so that it appears in the activity. And I can also add Nearpod 3D. Okay, so let's take a look at that one. Nearpod 3D, when I click it, you can see that cell that I shared with you earlier. There's Aztec temples, there's the earth, and the students would be able to manipulate these and use them. Amazing places. I'm going to choose galaxy, click done. And that's all there is to it. It's as simple as can be to add a 3D activity or model to your lesson. I'm going to click add slide again. What's another thing that I can add? I do want to show you video because it's probably the newest feature. It's called interactive video. Okay, so I'm going to search for a video. Now I could search Nearpod's video library, or I could upload a video of my own, or I could find a video on YouTube. So I'll just type Spanish foods. Okay, this one looks good. I can preview it to make sure it's good content. And then I can click save. So that video is now part of my lesson, and it'll be watchable just on my computer or on the students' devices, either way. But what's new, adding a video, that's been around since Nearpod was developed. But what's new is that you can now add an activity to the video. If you look down underneath the video, there's a button that says add activity at 1 minute and 17 seconds. So I can click and make an open-ended question or a multiple choice. If you remember at the beginning of the presentation, we talked about the most beneficial of those 4 groups. The most beneficial strategy was to have students answer questions in an open-ended way, like even right after a lecture. It doesn't have to be right after, but so an open-ended question is very effective. The second most effective was multiple choice, at least out of those 4. So anyway, you can go in and type a question. So how do you say, this is like the worst type of question. How do you say bread in Spanish? Okay, normally I would come up with something better, but yeah, anyway. Okay, so we've got a couple of answers. Which one's correct? Pan. So I'll put a check mark next to pan. I'll click, I could click to add additional answers, and then I'll just click save. So what'll happen is, as the students watch the video, they'll just be watching along, and then all of a sudden, they'll get to my question, and the video will pause, and my question will appear, okay? So they'll have to answer the question before watching the rest of the video. It's really a great new feature in Nearpod. You can add audio to the slides, a virtual reality field trip. This is where I searched for Easter Island. Okay, and I got a virtual reality view of Easter Island to add. Okay, so I can just select that, click done. Super easy. But for the students, it's going to be this great experience. In addition to these things that you can just add to the lessons, this is where you would go to add the game, Time to Climb. You can add a collaborate board. That's where you were all answering my question, and you could see each other's answers on the screen. And setting these things up is just as easy as you would hope, really. So the collaborate board, what's your favorite food?
Hey, Rob, you got a minute left. You want to see if there's any questions or anything? Or
Absolutely. Thanks for the heads up on that.
Yep.
So
it's hard to keep it to an hour. I know.
It is. So we just got a minute left. And remember, this is being recorded, so you can come back and watch it later. But do any of you have questions about what you've seen, or anything that I haven't shown that you'd like more information about?
There's nothing in the chat, but
okay.
Just want to give people the opportunity.
Absolutely.
And give them their full lunchtime.
Absolutely. So what I've shown you is that's really everything you need to know to get started. I'm not an expert in every single one of these types of activities. I've used 6 of them or 7, but you can figure them out yourself, really, just by trying them out and try using them with your students. We can come to your school virtually through Zoom and do presentations for the faculty at your school. We'd love to help you start using Nearpod. So thanks so much for attending.
If you're in the SEDC region, we're happy to come and work with you as well.
Very good, very good. And if you have any questions for me about the session, I just posted my email address in the chat, and I hope you have a great rest of your conference. Thanks.
Cool. Thanks, Rob. It's good.
Yep.
And Chris dropped a Google folder link in your email. So just drop that recording in there.
Okay. Sounds good.
Okay. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Clint. Thanks, Cody. Thanks everybody for attending.